My castaway this week is the actor Mark Rylance. Getting a ticket to see him perform is widely regarded as a guarantee you'll witness theatrical magic. He can barely set foot on stage or set these days without winning an award. Olivier's, Tonys, a BAFTA, he has got the lot. And he's come to the attention of a new and highly appreciative audience through his role as Thomas Cromwell in the BBC's adaptation of Wolf Hall. So where did it all begin? Well, his father's deep love of literature and poems, he was an English teacher, and his mother's rebellious streak and love of ritual seem like the perfect creative compost to feed a youngster who would go on to become one of the most acclaimed actors of his generation. Odd, though, that as a child he was cripplingly shy, not speaking till he was 6. He says, "I learned to speak and it made me very appreciative of words and speaking. It also meant that from the early part of my life, I had listened and watched a lot." And so listening and watching a lot, do you think that's at the very heart of good acting?
Yeah, listening particularly, yeah. I like having my parents described as compost.
Creative compost.
Creative compost, of course. That
I
makes
was
all
trying
the
to be nice. So you've been, very well known to theatre audiences for many, many years now, but I think it would be fair to say much less well known to TV viewers. Well, that's all changed, of course, with the success of Wolf Hall, and you'll have a couple of big films coming out soon. You are suddenly going to be much, much more recognisable. Have you thought about how that is going to materially change your life?
I think I feel happy to be coming to it at 54, 55 rather than at 20, 21. I feel like I've dodged a bullet there. That's quite a difficult fate to hit this kind of world where there's a lot of risk, and so there's a lot of people all the time going, "Oh, it's great, it's fantastic." There's a whole kind of circle around people being very positive and about things.
Does that make you suspicious automatically?
Yeah, automatically, yeah. But I can see also why they're being positive and what's going on, I have less interest to believe it now.
You play the part of Thomas Cromwell in the BBC's adaptation of Wolf Hall. Tell me about the process of bringing such a big character to the small screen.
We were talking about that over dinner last night, and someone was saying you must act exactly the same on the stage as in front of the camera, in terms of whether your emotions are truly felt, whether you're thinking things through and discovering things. So all those things are the same. Acting's a mixture of reaching out to people, which I would call a kind of electric thing. You have to stir and engage their imagination at times, and at other times being more like a magnet and drawing them towards you. It's really about hiding and revealing. Say the famous nunnery scene of Hamlet and Ophelia. When does Hamlet discover that Ophelia's father is secretly watching? And when does he reveal that he knows that? But obviously you've got to play your cards a lot closer to your chest when there's a camera.
So, Mark Rylance, I know that even getting your list has been, something of a struggle.
It has been, yeah. I have very loose boundaries, and I love lots of different types of music, so it's been very hard to distill down to 8.
Tell me about the first one this morning, then. What's this?
Well, this is Coleman Hawkins, and my friend John pointed this out to me as probably the greatest saxophone solo he knows. And I agree. I just think it's an extraordinary saxophone solo. But this song, which is called Body and Soul, you can really hear the kind of life of the body that we all lead. And then the saxophone is this marvellous soul, this psyche that we have in our dreams and in our waking moments too.
That was Coleman Hawkins and Body and Soul. For many years then, Mark Rylance, you have worked predominantly on stage. Not entirely, there have been some films along the way. You were in Angels and Insects, and Grass Arena was another. I wonder if staying largely in the theatre was very much a conscious decision for you.
Well, maybe it was. I've made a number of films. There have been odd films, you know, Institute Benumenta and Intimacy, and The Government Inspector was a good film. I went up for a lot of film auditions, but they didn't work out very well. I don't think I really understood it.
You said to one interviewer that one of the things that interested you was that, you know, film was just a certain moment's performance captured at that time and sort of frozen, whereas when you are on stage, you nothing is reheated. You don't take what you did from the night before.
No.
Every time is fresh. It seems a very interesting...
Well, sure, if you go to a restaurant, you don't want them to come out and say, we've got some things we served last night that we can reheat for you. You want the meal cooked fresh for you, and likewise in the theatre. There was quite a big turning point in 1987 when I was quite poor, and I auditioned for Steven Spielberg for a film called Empire of the Sun. And he offered me a very small part, and I'd just been in a terrible film with my hero Bob Dylan and had such a bad time in it. So I turned it down, the part, and then he came back and offered me a better part, Spielberg. And then within a couple of hours, Mike Alfreds, my great teacher and mentor in the theatre, who I wanted to work for ages, said, I've got this new season at the National, come and be part of it. And I did all the lists, you know, of the benefits of both. They were completely equal. And I turned eventually to the I Ching, and you just ask it where now, and it gives an answer. And the answer it gave, if I went to the theatre, was Community. And that swayed it for me. And I thought, yes, I had never experienced Community on film sets, because the community is amongst the technicians, the actors come and go. But in the theatre, you go through the deaths and the births and the happy and low moments of a group. So that decided it for me, and it was because of that decision that I met my wife, Claire.
so much to talk about, Mark Rylance. Tell me about your second piece this morning. Why have you chosen this, and what are we going to hear?
Oh, this is my beloved sister, Susanna, singing, who trained to be an opera singer. And then she became a novelist, and she has a wonderful family, and has just been such a great sister to me. And I went and heard her sing this at the Royal Opera House, which was a real treat, sitting way, way up high and seeing my sister playing Cupid in King Arthur by Purcell.
"'Tis I That Have Warmed Ye" from King Arthur by Purcell, played there by Les Arts Florissants, conducted by William Kirsty, and the soloist was your sister, Susanna Waters. So, Mark Rylance, you say your 20s then was, you had a lot to work out and you wouldn't have been ready for fame had it hit you then. Tell me about your 20s. What was it you were working out?
I was very intense. I felt I wanted to change things.
Were you very idealistic?
I was idealistic. I got together with friends and started a cooperative theatre company to try working without a director. I had troubles with authority figures. I was a very joyous character at times, but very isolated and melancholy at other times. Very, very serious, far too serious. And of course, I'd come from a very different culture from the Midwest of America. Arriving in London, I didn't really know what a pub was. And of course, the news in the Midwest was terrible. I didn't know anything, so I had a lot to catch up with. I think I had some issues with honesty too. I don't think I was able to be honest. I needed to be liked too much. I think that's the kind of miner's dust of an actor's life, is that you are a professional liar, and you can not only lie to others, you can lie to yourself.
You were born in Britain, and then your parents moved. Well, you were very young when they moved to America.
I was born in Willsborough, in Ashford, in Kent. My parents first went to Cyprus, where my brother was born, because my father had been in America and his visa had run out, so we couldn't go there immediately. That's where he wanted to go. He wanted to teach in America. My mother did not want to leave England and thought we'd only go for a few years. But in 1962, we sailed on the Queen Mary or Queen Elizabeth, I can't remember which, and I think it's my earliest memory. We arrive in New York, and I'm on a bunk in one of those liners playing with a little toy castle set. I can see it now, a little wooden drawbridge and little characters that came and went. And my father says, "Come here, look out this round window." And I go to the window, and it's the Statue of Liberty passing by. And recently I've been really lucky to have some plays that have gone to Broadway and lived down there in Chelsea when we were doing Jerusalem. And I used to run along the Hudson River there and try to imagine which of these piers I first arrived at.
time for some more music. What are we going to hear?
Oh, I had a wonderful music teacher when I was in high school in America, and he said, why don't you study Charles Ives? And I'm so grateful to him, because Charles Ives is the father of modern music, and he had a father who would detune pianos and have two marching bands march through the town while he and young Charles stood at the top of the steeple and listened to the cacophony of two marching bands playing different tunes coming into town and out of town again. And so Charles has a very original take on what music could be. This is a recording of Charles Ives singing a song called They Are There, which I think should be the American anthem. And it's been revived by the Kronos Quartet. They're playing along with this very old recording of Charles Ives singing this song.
When we're through this cursed war, all started by sneaking culture, making slaves of men, goddamn him, then let all the people rise and stand together for humanity. Most wars are made by small, stupid, selfish boys and groups, while the people have no say. But there'll come a day, hip hip hooray, when they'll smash all dictators to the wall. Then it's build a people's world nation, hooray, every honest country free to live his own native right. They will start for the right, but when it comes to much, they'll be dead.
They Are There, performed by Charles Ives and the Kronos Quartet. You had a damn good laugh through that, Mark Rylance.
I love it. I really love that song. It makes me think of all the wonderful activists I've known in my life. And that seems such a great rallying call for freedom.
Has that, I wonder, got anything to do with your mother, Anne, the fact that you like activists so much? I mean, she was somebody who well articulated her protestations against the world.
She did. She certainly did. In the 60s and 70s, my mother in America was very affected by the fight for rights for women. My grandfather said about her, dear chap, he said, your mother will never be satisfied, which infuriated my mother that he said that. But she was always seeing how things could be better and making efforts to do that fearlessly. I'll give a quick example. My father was Catholic and my mother was Episcopalian, Anglican. We went to both churches on holidays and alternated. And she was very involved in this little church run by Father Bill. But one weekend, Father Bill went out into the countryside and came back saying God had spoken to him. And he said, I'm going to reveal in the sermon today what it is. My mother was on the altar holding the bread and wine and doing that kind of thing. Anyway, Father Bill stood up on this day and said that God had told him that women should never be priests or bishops or have any leadership role in the church. And my mother, standing behind, thought, well, everyone's going to think I agree with this because I'm dressed in the same white gear. I'm up on the platform with him. So she stepped forward at the end of the sermon and said, I just feel I need to make clear to you all that I completely disagree with what Father Bill has said. And I remember my father and my brother and sister and I sitting there thinking we were going to be lynched. But all that happened was we didn't go to that church anymore. What about this business of you not talking until you were 6? That's true, is it? Yes, it is. I talked, but I think I talked more like that's my best impersonation of myself. Only my brother could understand me.
What was going on? Why were you not talking?
Very interesting subject. A friend of mine, James Hillman, wrote a great book where he looked at the behaviour of people who were known, like Winston Churchill or Eleanor Roosevelt. Not that they're different than other people, but because we know what they did and what they were like as children. And he said that though there were many things that people changed about themselves, there was, in every patient he'd ever worked with, there was a kind of core, essential thing that would not change and seemed to be timeless. And so whether some part of me had some intimation that I might one day get out in front of 2,500 people at the Palace Theatre and say to be or not to be, and keep my nerve with such famous words, he would propose that my young soul knew that and was terrified and doing everything to avoid that fate.
And is there something of that chimes with you? You don't think that's outlandish?
No, I don't think James is outlandish. James is a scientist and a doctor, and I think there's evidence for consciousness that's not limited by our physical nature.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, to sleep. Perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns which patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action.
It's time for your fourth. Tell me about this.
Well, I really adore Bob Dylan's songs and lyrics. I like the mystery of them. And I also love Nina Simone's singing. And so this is just like Tom Thumb's Blues, but sung by Nina Simone. And I think the mixture of them is like a very nice salad and salad dressing.
When you're lost in Juarez, and it's Easter time too, and your gravity fails and negativity don't pull you through. Don't put on any airs when you're down on Rue Morgue Avenue. got some hungry women there, and man, they'll really make a mess out of you.
Just like Tom Thumb's Blues, sung by Nina Simone. It was when you were first at school that you actually played Hamlet. You weren't just in the play. Right?
Yeah, I skipped all the other parts in Shakespeare and went straight to Hamlet.
How old were you?
I was 15 I was 16. I learnt it over that summer, 1976. We used to come every summer to England to visit grandparents and relatives. My mother's parents lived in Kent, in Sissinghurst, and I spent my summers there, idyllic summers, and my parents paid for it by taking American high school students to the theatre and to the Royal Tournament, Stonehenge, all these different things. So I would be taken along to all these things. And that summer I carried little Hamlet around and then played it in the autumn at school. And my father played the gravedigger. I don't know why, it just never seemed foreign to me, Shakespeare. It seemed to immediately express what I didn't have words to express.
And I have picked out Hamlet there for obvious reasons, but I'm wondering for you what stands out in your memory of that time in your life.
Well, I remember a particular night in the winter walking up to go to a hockey game. And I played ice hockey, but I was going up to watch a hockey game, and I just was dreading it. I just wasn't very good at parties and social things like that. And as I walked up, the part of the school where the theatre was, which was a very old wooden gymnasium, and there was a little light on, bleeding out through the blackened windows, and I thought, they're in there building the set. And I'd always loved building forts and things like that when I was younger. And I remember standing and thinking, where do I want to go? Do I really want to meet these people and go? And I thought, no, I want to go in there. And I went and knocked on the door, and sure enough, a funny guy called Dick Rubenstein opened the door, and he welcomed me in. And for a long time, I just would carry the rubbish to the end of the school, down the dark corridors. We used to hide in the ventilation shafts when they locked up the theatre and the janitors went home, and then we would come out and work through the night, building the sets and putting the lighting up and things like that. And again, it was just an incredible community, and it was a turning point that night, and I never looked back.
Tell me about the first musical that you were in, The Me That Nobody Knows.
I did do musicals. American high school theatre programs have musicals, so I played Don Quixote in The Man of La Mancha and Pseudolus in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. And the first musical, yes, Me Nobody Knows, was a musical about hard life in New York, heroin addicts and things like this. And it was a very good thing for the school to do, because all the kids were rather privileged. We were all privileged. And so this was a look at something else. And I was only 14 or 15 in it. But my parents came, and we had about a 45-minute drive home in the VW bus with my sister and my brother. And there was a big cast, 35 or so. They mentioned everybody else but me. Oh, Phil, he was marvellous. I never thought he had it in him. Marvellous. And very later on, my father admitted to me that they thought I was just terrible, absolutely terrible, and they didn't know what to say. And I don't think I was very good. I think they were probably right.
Well, it's time for some more music then, Mark Rylance. It's your fifth of the morning. Tell me a bit about this.
Oh, yeah. I really loved to dance, and I particularly loved dancing with my daughters, Natasha and Juliet. But when I arrived in England in 78 and then in the early 80s, one thing was the Sex Pistols and punk music was such an inspiration, but the other, maybe slightly more long-lasting, Joanna Desert Island would be a good reggae tune. So I found this lovely song by Justin Hines and the Dominoes, which Natasha gave me actually on a CD, and I think this one will keep me dancing for a while on the islands.
Oh yes, what you gonna say to me? Oh yeah, oh yeah, what you gonna say to me? Oh yes, once a month, twice a child, things that you lives with you.
Once a Man, Twice a Child, Justin Hines and the Dominoes. Did you feel, when you came to London, you won a place at RADA, did you feel like an American in London? Or did you feel like just a British person who'd been away?
I had considered myself English in America. My mother used to throw a tea party on July 4th and fly the English flag and make jokes about the colonies. And I was called the Limey, and I had a Midwest accent. So it was an enormous shock. I arrived in London and was called the American. And I knew very little about American culture, actually. So it was a very strange thing. It's funny to think that there's racism about Americans, but there's a lot of anger about America and a lot of love and fascination about America. So people presumed a lot about you from your accent. I hid and buried my American accent as best I could. As an actor, I wanted to be able to disappear more, and listen and see without standing out so much.
When you were at RADA then in those early days, did you find that whenever you were involved in the process of working out how better and best to do things, you lost that shyness? Was that the sort of comfort for you in acting in the beginning?
I think I probably learned to speak by acting when I was speechless, when I was younger, with friends, just acting for hours and hours in the basement or in the woods or on the campuses of these schools. And I think playing other people always gave me a channel to speak. That was how I learnt to speak and to be. So I always felt more comfortable, and I forgot myself when I pretended to be someone else. So it was a great relief. So in that way, that's another connection between being speechless, something that might have really worried a parent, but actually it propelled me into something that, fortunately, I've been lucky enough to have the right attributes to be successful at.
Tell me how you met your wife.
I met my wife on the first day of rehearsals of The Wandering Jew at the National Theatre. We were going to rehearse for 12 weeks, and it didn't work out so well, the show. But Claire was there. She was to be the musical director. I'd given up on relationships at the time. I thought I just was hopeless and that I had just hurt people and was no good. So I thought maybe I just need to be wild and free and reckless. And I was a bit reckless because Claire was married to Chris and had 2 young children. But their marriage was going through a hard time. And now we're a 5-person family, in that Chris is probably one of my best friends and has been very, very forgiving, and he'd go on long walks together, and he's just a fantastic, fantastic man. So I'm the kind of co-father. I think like pilot and co-pilot, because my girls won't let me say I'm the stepfather, as they were 3 and 7 at the time.
Particularly then, why have you picked this composition of Claire's? What is it about this one that stands out?
Well, Claire's written so much wonderful music. As you know, our youngest daughter, Natasha, died on the 1st July 2012. And very fortunately, my eldest daughter, Juliet, and her husband decided to make a film. It was a version of The Seagull, reset in the 1980s and filmed in Connecticut. And we all were together for that spring. Natasha worked on the film. Juliet, of course, was producing it and acting in it. I acted in it. Claire was writing the music, and we were all together for the final months of Natasha's life. And indeed, she died on the flight back. But Claire had to carry on and write the music for the film in the months after that. And obviously, we were all devastated. But for a mother to lose a child is just unthinkable. But she was able to write this music. This is one of the pieces for that film. So I just think it was a very remarkable thing for her to do.
Music from the soundtrack of the film Days and Nights, composed by your wife, Claire Van Kampen. You were artistic director of the Globe for, I think it was a decade.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that is probably most apparent if you're a theatre goer there is that you are watching something as it would have been watched at the time that Shakespeare was writing the plays that he was writing.
To the best of our ability, yeah.
Yes. The audience is almost part of the whole thing. I mean, the audience is incredibly
most
close to the
definitely.
stage.
Well, that's the big thing about the Globe, is the audience, you realise he gave the audience so much power, they can come and go without it being embarrassing. In most theatres, other theatres now, if you really are fed up and bored, it's usually a very embarrassing walk, getting everyone else to stand up as you leave. But in the Globe, you can leave at any moment and you can come back in again. He welcomes the physical nature of humanity into the building.
You took your Hamlet for a one-off performance to Broadmoor. What did the psychiatric hospital? What did the audience there make of it?
Well, we were very concerned that things like the violent treatment of Ophelia, the murder of Polonius, it was a modern dress production at the RSC, and I was in pyjamas and stuff. It wasn't distanced by period, and about 150 people crammed in. Maybe 80 were staff and nurses. The nurses were the ones who actually got us in, and the doctors were against it. And the nurses said, no, if it upsets them, that's fine. Until they get upset, they don't get better. Most of the patients there have killed someone they dearly love, and so they have to realise who they are and what they've done, and then not kill themselves, but actually have some hope that there's a point to carry on with their lives and to learn what the triggers are that disturb them so.
Did you talk to any of the patients afterwards?
Yeah, we went back a week later, and actually the thing that had affected them most was the graveyard scene. I used to jump into the grave and say, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers with all their quantity of love could not make up my sum. And I always thought in performance, I'm amazed that some woman doesn't stand up in the audience and say, how dare you say that, with the way you treated her and projected onto her all your problems. And a young man, a patient at the hospital that day when we acted it, came over when I said that line, but put his hand on my shoulder and said, I believe you. And it was the most remarkable thing, remarkable moment for me. So we in that case, we all learned something from it. So that the doctors could say to the patients, I imagine, why did you weep when that happened? But it would be easier to talk about the play than to talk about your own problems. Yeah.
Tell me what we're going to hear next. It's your seventh of the morning.
Oh, yeah. This is Andy Irvine and Paul Brady, who I just think fantastic Irish musicians and singers. And it's a very old song, Arthur McBride and the Sergeant, which is about an English sergeant trying to forcefully conscript two Irishmen who are out walking on Christmas morning. I think we won't hear the whole song, but what we'll hear is the approach from the English sergeant. But what we won't hear, unfortunately, and I advise everyone to listen to it, is the marvellous treatment that the Irishmen give to the English sergeant. But it makes me think of all the brave, conscientious objectors to the First World War. I wish many more had been able to do it. So this song is for all those who are brave enough to say no to war.
Oh, me and my cousin one Arthur MacBride, as we went a-walking down by the seaside. Now mark what followed and what did betide, for it being on Christmas morning, out for recreation we went on a tramp, and we met Sergeant Napper and Corporal Vamp, and a little wee drummer intending to count, for the day being pleasant and charming.
That was Andy Irvine and Paul Brady with Arthur MacBride. You've spoken about the fact that you enjoy being part of a company of people, that for you being involved in the acting profession is that is a great part of it. Aside from that, when you are actually acting, occupying the character, what is it about it that you really enjoy? You strike me as you came in today, you're a very playful person. You like to play.
I like to play, yes. Yeah, and I realised in my 30s, I just love to play act. Maybe it's also being part of a story. Life seems so chaotic, and in a play you're part of a story. I just get lots of ideas and things happen on the stage on a good night, on most nights now. In fact, I look forward to accidents and things going wrong on stage. I think, oh, great, now what's going to happen when people forget lines, or I forget lines, or things go, because they come so present. But in life, I'm much more critical and much more self-conscious.
An unbearable cruelty, but of course I must cast you away to this desert island.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Have you imagined it in your head?
Yeah. I think I'll be lonely.
Will it matter that there's no audience?
No. There'll be an audience anyway. There'll be the sea and the wind and the stars, and all the joys of being an animist and a pagan will come to fruition on my desert kingdom.
How useful for you. Tell me about your eighth then.
Well, I think the late quartets of Beethoven, interesting, talking about the benefits of limitation, and the fact that Turner painted those wonderful paintings when he could hardly see, and that Beethoven wrote these late quartets when he couldn't hear anymore, is a remarkable thing. There's so much focus that you have to do things when you're younger. Now that I'm older, of course, I'm very interested in artists who did great things when they were very old. Another useful philosophy of mine. But anyway, I think this... I think the 132 is probably the saddest and most profound piece of music I know. This is a quartet that follows that, and it's a particular movement in it which lifts out of that mood that he has set, and particularly this Bush quartet from the 1930s. And I also like that the recording, you can still hear the scratchiness, that it's basically gut and wood, and it's manifested quite crudely, this exquisite music.
That was part of the second movement of Beethoven's Quartet number 16 in F sharp, played by the Bush Quartet. So we come then, Mark, to the books. I give you the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare, and you get to take one other book. What are you going to take?
I'm going to take this book of the poetry and writings of Rumi, the great Sufi poet. It's called The Big Red Book, the great masterpiece celebrating mystical love and friendship, and this will satisfy me.
Right, that is yours then, and a luxury too. What will your luxury be?
Well, I think I'm going to take the stand-up bass that my wife bought me when I left the Globe, and as she reminded me this morning, you haven't touched it. I have touched it, but I at one time played bass in a band when I was a teenager, and listening to music today, I think I could learn to play along in some way. I think that would keep me occupied. Yeah.
That's yours then. And one track to save.
Oh, I think I'll take the Beethoven.
It's yours. Mark Rylance, thank you very much for letting us hear your Desert Island Discs.
Thanks.